Welcome to Rings and Things, where we discuss Tolkien adaptations and texts.
We're just two hobbits from the Shire, one bringing the other along on this adventure.
I'm your host, Agnes, and this is my co-host,
Recurring guest star,
JD. Today we're covering the animated adaptations of The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and The Return of the King from Ralph Bakshi and Rankin and Bass. Rankin and Bass were the creators of The Hobbit and The Return of the King. Ralph Bakshi created The Lord of the Rings in the middle of those two. So we'll try to go through chronologically, start with The Hobbit, then go to the animated Lord of the Rings, which unfortunately does not really conclude, and then finish up with the cartoon called The Return of the King.
Yep, sounds good. Ready to jump into The Hobbit?
Let's jump into The Hobbit. So The Hobbit opens with a framing, and we had some overall impressions to talk about. What was the first thing you noticed, JD?
So there was a very lengthy prologue, and it felt pretty Lord of the Rings to me.
Every Lord of the Rings adaptation needs a prologue.
There's like a style to the prologue that I can't define. I don't have specific points, but there's, prologues are a dime a dozen, but a Lord of the Rings verse prologue is something else.
And the prologue sets Middle-earth in the real world right away, was something I noticed. It doesn't lose any time trying to separate it from our world. It puts it right into our world.
Yeah, it's a bigger theme throughout the movies, that's for sure. Especially in the framing devices.
Mm-hmm. And you notice that this movie moves pretty quickly.
Yeah, so after the prologue, it does definitely, it's just every scene feels super quick to jump to the next part, very fast. There's two lines of dialogue per plot point where, if we're comparing to the Hobbit adaptation that came out in 2012 or whatever, they would have 10 lines or something like that. The dwarves are introduced all at the same time. It's for kids, I get it, shorter attention span, but you can definitely feel it's whoa, okay, we're going.
Yeah, it definitely is at a different pacing than the Hobbit trilogy. So early on, Gandalf is introduced.
Yeah, Gandalf was pretty scary right off the bat. I feel like he set a much creepier tone to the whole guy showing up and talking to you at your house for Bilbo in this film, which is how I remember the book. But he seemed a little bit smoother and more charismatic in the actual Hobbit, in the Hobbit film.
I kept noticing all kinds of things about Gandalf as we were going through the movie, kind of related to what you were saying. The first thing I actually observed was that animated Gandalf seems to think that the dwarves were actually working magic with their song. Mm. He made comments to that effect.
Well, that goes in. You said something similar to that, though, that it was actual magic. I think.
It's ambiguous in the original text, but this version of Gandalf seemed to agree with that take of mine, which was something that stood out to me. Moving ahead in the movie to focus on some of the things that Gandalf did throughout the movie, I noticed that he makes a habit of showing up in the nick of time. He does it twice. Once with the trolls and then once with the goblins. He's just I'm going to show up, save you guys from trouble, in the nick of time.
That's exactly how it is in the book, and this is much in my opinion. There might be some debate back and forth about this. I feel like this is much closer to the overall themes and feel of the book, though, than the Peter Jackson films. And Gandalf just showing up out of nowhere to save the day is both okay, good, he saved us, but where were you? Dude, we needed you.
Yeah. And I agree with your assessment of how it portrays the book. This movie is intended to be a kid's movie the way the book is intended to be a kid's book.
Yes.
The Hobbit trilogy was not intended to be kids' movies. It didn't get an R rating for being a kid's movie.
No, yeah.
And all the way through this cartoon, I kept thinking, oh, JD's going to make all these comments about Gandalf's moral culpabilities.
It's definitely best highlighted in this movie. This depiction, you know, they soften his edges a lot in the more modern films, but they make him a very cut and dry kind of guy, in my opinion. He's not as soft or fun. No lovable grandpa energy. It's just scary man.
Yeah, definitely. I went back to look at some of the passages revolving around Gandalf leaving them at Mirkwood. And I did find that Book Gandalf does refer to being late because of bothering with them, like he does in this movie. But the context of it in the book made me feel more like it was dry English humor than anything else. And I gotta say, this movie did not make it feel like dry English humor the same way that it feels in the book.
No, they if anything, they upped Gandalf's, I don't know if edgy is the right word, but they upped his
questionability.
Yeah, he definitely seems cruel. It's really refreshing to see this take on Gandalf for me personally.
Yes, I agree. This telling seems to paint a grayer version of Gandalf, so to speak. And I would say grayer even than the book. Even though they use the same words, it just didn't have the same ring in the book that it did in the movie.
Yeah, that comes down to like artistic direction in animation, music, dialogue delivery.
Exactly.
And they all leaned really heavy on Gandalf being very stern almost, I would say, at times.
Yeah, definitely.
And I do feel like when you were reading the book, from what I remember, he did have a bit of a jovial edge to him. He was always a bit of a trickster guy. So I kind of did miss that a bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll have to see what is in store in the book when we get there.
Mm-hmm. And then obviously in the films, Gandalf is super lovable compared to this, though.
And there's even differences in Gandalf in the books. Like, Hobbit Gandalf is not the same as Lord of the Rings Gandalf.
Yeah.
But then at the very end of the Hobbit movie, at the end of this animated Hobbit movie, Gandalf gives it a very ominous ending, foreshadowing so much about the ring and everything, which totally isn't in the Hobbit book.
No. Yeah.
And it just makes Gandalf seem all the more morally questionable and gray. And why in the world are you doing any of this if you know all of this stuff about the ring? But it's the ending to a child's movie.
Yep. This quick note on this specific scene with Gandalf knowing too much about the ring, because the writers wanted to throw that in to reference the full work of fiction, kind of reminds me of that. It's a thing writers do. They just like to throw in references for people who've read the books, even if it doesn't make sense. This when we did War of the Rohirrim, the death charge complaint you had kind of feels like in a similar vein to this. Like they just threw that reference in to throw the reference in, even if it didn't really fit in you know, the themes of the movie versus the book.
That makes sense. Yeah,
it's a thing that they do a lot when making adaptations, and why a lot of people hate movie versions if they're not done well, because they'll throw something in there as a nod to the fans that actually undermines the whole vibe or theme or something else like that. And Gandalf knowing definitely makes everything very ominous.
Very shady, yeah.
Yeah, shady Gandalf.
Well, other changes they made also include...
Yeah, so in the intro scene, the dwarfs all pop out at once and sing, which is fun, I guess, but not how I remember the book being. I remember them all slowly and introducing themselves and entering, which it was big. It was really funny. They just wanted to get on with it, you know. The breakneck pace was more important, I feel like. Yeah. And right off the bat, Bilbo seems much more excited to go off with these dwarves. Like he doesn't exactly say yes right away, but he's very like, oh, I don't know, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't.
Yeah, Bilbo's temperament is definitely different. And this adaptation did not make any attempt to personalize all of the dwarves the way the Hobbit trilogy did. So introducing them all separately doesn't serve much of a purpose in this particular telling.
And to be fair, this is how I basically remember the dwarves from reading The Hobbit. Like, just a different color cloak, but a guy with a beard.
Yep. Another thing in this telling is that Bjorn is entirely skipped.
Yeah, I didn't like that. I like Bjorn. I didn't cover it too much in our covering of Peter Jackson's films, but I felt something was off about Bjorn versus in the book still. I couldn't put my finger on it, so I didn't talk about it, but skipping him entirely is even worse. Mm-hmm. I really like Bjorn's a fun character, and in The Hobbit, like the Hobbit films, they did all right, but he was very important, I felt like, to the story, so I didn't get that. But back to where things were chronologically, Bilbo, the night that before they leave, he is dreaming about his journeys leading him to be king, like, of everything, or maybe just the Shire. It wasn't clear.
Yeah, it was in the title sequence in the credits that you had the Bilbo dreaming about being king sequence, which I didn't really get. I feel like this scene entirely misses the point of Bilbo's relationship to power, because like the whole reason Bilbo is a good ring finder is he doesn't desire power. Yeah,
I don't know. The only thing I could think of was like this was just showing how weird dreams can be, which fair. It just doesn't make sense in the context of the story to show this at all.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't further our understanding of him in any way.
No. It's the exact opposite, and it doesn't come up early again that Bilbo is interested in anything like that whatsoever,
because he's not.
No, exactly, because he's not.
Yeah, so I didn't really get it. It was really wild. Absolutely agree with that. But it also didn't really detract from the movie because they never went back to it. So
yeah, it was just like such an odd scene.
Very much. Another weird thing they did.
They had Bilbo chanting like comfort foods while marching in. Well, anytime he was really uncomfortable, it was like a theme throughout the movie eventually. But the first time he was like in the rain, marching through, having to go on, I felt like that. I don't remember if this is in the book or not, or if it's just purely adaptational. But it definitely is something that is World War I coded for me.
So in the book, he being Bilbo. Bilbo definitely thinks about food and home and comfort a lot. Bacon and eggs come up in Bilbo's inner monologue quite a bit in the book. But I don't remember any chanting comfort foods in the rain specifically. Maybe it's there and I just forgot it, but I don't remember it offhand. And I really don't feel like The Hobbit was where Tolkien put any of his World War I trauma anyway. He reserved that for like the Dead Marshes.
I will comment on this later, but I will note your opinion. I got to think more about that.
I mean, I'm open to modifying my opinion if we have the right, textual evidence for that. But
generally speaking, my opinion on both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, vaguely, just the entire works of Tolkien, is that it's kind of a World War I soldier's take on what, if the world had his morals or good morals, what war would be like. And I feel like The Lord of the Rings definitely is more so, but there are parts of The Hobbit that I feel like are tinted with that a little bit.
Well, I mean, he was a World War I soldier who wrote a story, so in a certain sense, anything he writes will be a World War I soldier's take on X.
Right.
Because he will forever be a World War I soldier. But I'm open to examining the question, but I don't remember much World War I influenced material in The Hobbit. It was a children's book. He wasn't going to put his war traumas in there.
No, not overtly, at least.
I mean, they don't even have the battle.
Yeah, the battle's off screen. I do feel like, was he in the hospital when the war ended? I feel like that's kind of a reference to that, if that was what happened, but I might be mixing up stuff here.
He was dismissed early from the war because he had something. I don't remember if it was trench fever or what precisely it was. I want to say it was trench fever. But he got sent home before the war was done. I feel like that's
it rhymes. Him not being there when the war ended, being back home, and also Bilbo missing the final battle, to me.
It probably says more about not wanting to write a battle.
That's true. Yeah, Tolkien was like, this is really what happened, but not interested in fleshing that out. This is a children's book. I don't know what to do with that. But yeah, that's probably accurate.
I think I see more World War I trauma in not writing the battle at all than in anything else that we've talked about.
I will put a attack in this and do some homework.
Sounds good. So we have the beloved troll scene.
Yes, I liked these depictions of the trolls a lot. Quite a bit.
What made you like them so much?
Just the way they looked, really. It's hard to describe. Like, they were freaky and terrifying. Probably one of the few times where I've seen an adaptation depict something like better than I would have imagined it in my head reading the source material. It's just...
That's super cool.
Really, really good job. A+ there.
That's really cool. I was taken aback that Bilbo turned in his traveling companions to the trolls.
Yeah.
It was just so unexpected.
Yeah, everything else besides how the trolls actually looked in the scene was weird, because also they just get saved by Gandalf.
Yeah, Gandalf just pops up and saves the day.
And this was like Bilbo's, in the story, in the movies too, his first time showing that he had value. He could save the day with not strength, but being clever and his wit.
Bilbo gets done dirty in this scene.
Yeah, I really didn't like that.
So there's a lot of important artifacts in this movie.
They get swords. Where do these swords even come from? The trolls or the goblins? Gandalf
finds the swords in the troll horde.
Yeah, the troll horde. That's what I thought. So they find some swords with old runes. They're talking about the difference between them. I felt allegorical for me when I first was watching this. I'm not sure about what at all, but I don't think this is from the book either, so I really have no clue. It drew my attention, though.
I went back and rewatched the scene when I saw your note, and I kind of think I get what you say when you say it feels a little bit allegorical. It feels heavy-handed, is, I think, the way I describe it. And allegory and heavy-handedness tend to go hand in hand.
Right. I don't know what if the animators or the people making this adaptation were going for exactly.
I'm not sure either. What I did notice was that Thorin's attitude about the treasure being his, regardless of its history, seems like it foreshadows his greed later.
Yeah, Thorin and treasure never go well together.
No, not even troll treasure.
This might have been good in the discussion for Gandalf, but in this scene he reveals he has a map, and they're like, "You had a map this whole time?" His line is, "I've chosen my own time to hand it over," which I thought that was funny. A great line from Gandalf.
Yeah.
It really sums up his his weird attitude this whole movie. He's like sassy and mean. It's funny though.
Don't ever question me.
The swords history subplot comes up again later, and it grew on me by then, so I will say that now. They talk about it over and over again, and for some reason it started to be interesting to me. I'm loving it all of a sudden, but the very first scene struck me as weird, and then eventually it kind of, over time, just developed, I feel like.
The sword history is in the book as well.
Yeah.
So, after they get through Rivendell, though, they go down to Goblin Town.
Bilbo says, right before he falls down a hole, that he wishes he could disappear, which I thought was funny. That was a little interesting thing. That might be a book thing, too. I don't know.
I don't remember it, but it is a bit of foreshadowing, the disappearing.
This rendition of Goblin Town I liked better than the Peter Jackson one. It goes pretty hard.
You don't have a Goblin King with a beard of fat.
No, he's just... They all look the same, actually, all the goblins.
Mm-hmm. And then we get Gollum, who definitely looks weird.
Gollum, I love... I really like a lot of... The only thing I don't like is how the hobbits looked in this movie. Everything else I really like. I like the trolls. I like Gollum. He looks so weird. I like it a lot better than I'd even say the Peter Jackson one, who it's just because it's weird. It's odd. And it feels fantastical. Maybe that's what I liked about the trolls too, but it feels just like a wild, crazy adventure with these weird alien creatures.
I can see that, yeah.
There was things that I thought Gollum was blind, but I think looking back it was just dark. But I thought maybe he was blind from being in the dark for so long, but he couldn't see.
Gotcha. No, pretty sure he was not blind.
Yeah.
I made some notes regarding comparing this version of The Hobbit to the Hobbit trilogy.
Yeah, I kind of intersplice those. But yeah.
But I had a few that I didn't know where else to put.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a bit about the barrel scene from the Hobbit trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
So this barrel scene was about a minute.
Yeah.
Going down the river was 10 seconds. I just want to say that this is a much more manageable length for the barrel scene.
Absolutely.
10 out of 10 barrel scene. Loved it.
Yes. Yeah, that's all it needed to be.
I also observed that, just like in the Hobbit trilogy, Bard is actually introduced in this movie before he is in the book.
And to be fair, in the book, isn't he introduced basically the same page that he slays the dragon?
Yeah, it's like the same page or the page before.
Yeah, it's just like there's this guy who comes out and does it. It's, again, for me, I feel like that was such a rug pull that honestly, I liked it, but I think it would be so hard to depict that in a movie. It was hard enough to sell in a book, let alone a movie.
Yeah, I don't buy it out of the book. I'm definitely not going to buy it out of a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked the Bard that they introduced when Thorin and company came through Lake Town the first time. Mm-hmm. He didn't need a huge, complicated backstory. They just introduced him so that he was a known entity.
Yeah.
When he comes along to kill Smaug.
Yeah, that is also much better. Just, hey, this isn't he like the captain of the guard or something like that, the town guard?
Something like that. I was a little vague on it.
It's like, yeah, that's perfect. And then they say hey and they walk away. It's like, great, wonderful. No, oh my god, I can't even tell you exactly what was going on with Bard in the Peter Jackson version, but it was just so contrived, so complicated, so much for no good reason. With no payoff. I don't get it. This isn't even the movie we're talking about anymore, but we got to compare it, right? And Peter Jackson Bard just gets me that bad.
Well, the action scenes get me that bad. I like the proportion of action in this movie to the rest of it. It might be a breakneck speed, but the action scenes are breakneck speed too.
Yeah, it's a kids movie too, so the action has to be muted a lot in certain ways. They have, some classic 80s or even those 70s 80s animation tricks to get around showing actual violence directly, but implying it still. And I it was good. It was a very good balance where it just was enough to pull the story forward.
Yeah.
Unlike just like the barrel scene, I feel like is kind of in the same problem with the action scenes. It's like it was only that extended so there could be more action.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, gosh, it doesn't need to be this.
But then the Eagles arrive. Yeah,
the Eagles theme in this movie, I feel like, so the Eagles theme with the trumpet and the fanfare is super on point for the themes that Eagles represent in Tolkien's work. And I feel like despite other weird adaptational things, there is a lot of love from the creators or directors, art directors of this movie for Tolkien's books. I could feel it coming through,
Yeah, definitely. It's a very sweet adaptation for children of a children's book.
Mm-hmm. And the Eagles' dialogue, I felt like they did a good job because they were kind of stern. They were reassuring but harsh. They promise safety and guarantee it, but they're not cloyingly comforting at all either. I just feel like that was very good for what they're like thematically in Lord of the Rings.
Well, they're not tame eagles.
Yeah, they are definitely not.
So overall, I got the impression that you really liked this movie.
I have a few minor complaints that I didn't, but I would say this, all in all, on average, was better than the Hobbit trilogy, probably, easily. Like, if you want to watch The Hobbit and then watch The Lord of the Rings, watch this, then watch the Peter Jackson trilogy. But I don't know. Bilbo was a little weird. He didn't strike me as the Bilbo that I remember. I feel like Martin Freeman did a much better job. The other hobbits weren't exactly like interesting or well depicted. I feel like. Mm-hmm. Oh, hold on. That's from the other movies. So we'll save that for later. But like, yeah, Bilbo was a bit weird. The trolls being kind of forgettable was not as cool as the Peter Jackson, but all in all, I feel like this was a great depiction, especially considering all of the factors that within the parts that I don't like had good reasons to be that way, at least. Mm-hmm. 8.5 out of 10. 8.5 out of 10, I'd say.
I think you enjoyed it a lot more than I did. I think I'd give it probably a 7 out of 10, I guess.
Yeah.
My advice for wanting to watch a Hobbit adaptation would be to watch An Unexpected Journey and forget everything else exists.
Just imagine the rest.
An Unexpected Journey is all you need. It's got riddles in the dark. It's got some Shire scenes. It's got trolls. It's got Goblin Town. That's all you need.
Yeah, this movie was good. As we have two other movies that kind of fit together as a trilogy with this. As we go on, we'll talk about the other ones.
Yeah, so next up we have Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings.
So the prologue on this one did have a different feeling. It wasn't like a lengthy yarn. It kind of was concise, I would say. I liked it, but it was different.
I thought it was actually very similar to the New Line Cinema films.
Oh, really?
Well, because the book doesn't have a prologue at all in it. I mean, the book has a prologue, but it has nothing to do with this. The prologue in the book is all about pipeweed and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But this was the first adaptation to make that adaptation choice to create a prologue explaining like the history of the rings and everything. So it's actually I would say the underlying inspiration for the Peter Jackson prologue that we see in the live action trilogy. Peter Jackson takes a lot of inspiration from Bakshi's Lord of the Rings on several fronts. There's several moments in the movie that show foreshadowing of what Peter Jackson would later do as inspired by this.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. It makes sense, but yeah, I never put together that this was a film that Peter Jackson probably at least in preparation watched, but might have watched before he even knew he was going to be directing Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely. This was the adaptation of Lord of the Rings for a long time.
Right. Yeah. And I just remember thinking this one, the pacing was also much quicker after the prologue.
Yeah. One of the weird things I noticed in the prologue was that they only recite 2 lines of the ring verse in the Black Speech. They don't say all 4. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them. 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. It's just those first 2 lines that they say in the Black Speech, and then they don't say the second 2 lines.
Yeah, that is something. I wonder why.
So, one of the things that it probably doesn't take a lot of people long to notice in this movie is that the animation looks a little weird at times. And this is a technique called rotoscoping.
Yes. It's
where a scene is filmed and then drawn over to make the animation look more realistic.
Yeah, I don't think it... And I didn't look into this. I just watched it. I don't think it was all rotoscoped. I think there were parts that were and parts that weren't, which made the rotoscope parts look even weirder. I noticed it by the Prancing Pony.
Yeah. I noticed it in the prologue. There's parts that are rotoscoped. And there's definitely some scenes are rotoscoped and some scenes are pure animation. But there's a lot of rotoscoping going on. Yeah.
There's some where I feel like there are characters who are rotoscoped and then animated in the same frame, which looks really weird.
And I tried to do some looking into precisely why this movie ends so abruptly and whatnot. I'd heard at one point that because the rotoscoping was so expensive and Bakshi did so much of it early on, that this was why he ran out of funding. This is just one story I've heard. I was reading a different story from every site when I was trying to research this. I have no idea what's actually true. The thing that's universal through all these different stories, though, is that it always comes down to studios, money, and politics of some sort. And honestly, exactly how it all goes down with studios, money, and politics doesn't really interest me in the slightest.
Yeah.
I just want to enjoy the work and see what art is in the work.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that rotoscoping was more expensive. I thought that was a cost-saving measure.
Well, you have to pay actors to film it, and then you have to pay animators to animate over it besides. Yeah,
there is a way to balance underpaying the actors and overpaying the animators so that eventually it would be cheaper, though. Yeah. But that's probably, just because that's the case doesn't mean it happened that way. If it was more expensive than it was.
And it's also possible that what I heard about the rotoscoping being expensive is also not true, because there was so much contradictory information that I was finding.
Yeah, it's hard for me to know either way, really, in the long term. I guess it depends on a lot of factors that, which again, you say in the long run don't really matter for the end product, really.
Yeah. There's a lot of details in this movie which really surprised me that they survive from the book.
Such as?
I'll point out a few of them.
As we go? Okay.
As we go.
Yes, please do.
I will try to make a more complete list of what surprises me that survives in our appendix.
Okay.
And I also think this movie does a good job of preserving snippets of the poetry from the book as well.
I think I said this in the next film, but a lot of the narration was, I think, directly just from the book.
Yeah, you mentioned that a couple times, and I put those in our Wizard's Wisdom to discuss more there.
Oh, okay, cool. So
after the prologue, Bakshi's Lord of the Rings jumps into the Shire.
In the Shire, the first scene, Bilbo is much more, I said enthralled, or he's much more interested in the ring, might be a better way to put it.
I really liked your choice of the word enthralled, because enthralled literally means enslaved.
Yeah.
And yeah. I liked that visual you were creating for his relationship with the ring, that he's falling under its sway and becoming its slave.
Yeah, he's definitely more into the ring, for sure.
For sure. It's very sinister.
Mm-hmm. And then after the scene where Bilbo and Frodo inherits the ring from Bilbo, they just throw 17 years past sleepily in the Shire. And honestly, thank you. I needed that.
This is one of the details that I end up being surprised survives, like this kind of thing. That they didn't have to mention it was 17 years, but that's very precise and very book accurate.
And did I miss? But Frodo had no speaking lines before the time jump there, did he?
I don't remember him saying anything, no.
I thought that was odd.
I wonder where Frodo's first speaking line in the book is. I don't know.
I remember thinking Gandalf touching the ring directly was odd compared to in the films, the Peter Jackson films. He doesn't seem to even want to touch it.
Yeah, in the Peter Jackson films, there's definitely a taboo around Gandalf touching it, for sure. But in the book, Gandalf does touch the ring. There isn't the inhibition with physical contact so much as the threat of possession and desiring possession. Insofar as holding it might increase that desire for possession, perhaps holding it can be a medium of temptation.
Yeah.
But Gandalf is so powerful that physical contact with it isn't the deciding factor. Yeah. If he wanted to take it from Bilbo, he could take it from Bilbo.
That's true, yeah. Anytime he's around it, it's basically in his possession, just like half a second away from being there, you know?
So I was using the word possession differently. He can hold it without being its owner.
Right.
So anytime Gandalf is in the proximity of the ring, he is just an action away from stealing it.
Exactly, yes.
It's no different to Gandalf to hold the ring and resist temptation as it is to not actually rip it off a defenseless hobbit.
Mm-hmm. That's true, but I think the taboo around touching it shows like really powerful. Like he doesn't even want to start, because holding it often kind of is like testing out stealing it in a way, you know. It probably scratched the same part of the brain, like, oh, I'll carry it for you, you know. Not, you know, carrying it for people's theme later, but you know, for like Gandalf saying, I'll hold it while we walk together. He probably wouldn't want to do that, and not even wanting to touch it's the ultimate like form of that, like all the way extrapolated out.
Yeah, I don't think Gandalf would want to touch it gratuitously or needlessly.
Yeah.
But in the scene in Bag End, he's doing something functional with it.
Yeah.
While not claiming possession of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. But I still give props to Peter Jackson for... I think they show Gandalf a few times, like, flinching away from even having to touch it.
Yeah, it's definitely a great visual choice in the in the New Line Cinema movies. Mm-hmm. But this is another detail that's preserved from the books.
Yeah.
That
because Gandalf touches it in the book.
That Gandalf touches the ring and isn't intimidated by it.
And then compared to the New Line Cinema movies, Frodo is much more attached to the ring before leaving the Shire, I feel like. I don't remember that being a theme at all.
Once again, in the Peter Jackson movies and the New Line Cinema movies, it's not really a theme. Mm-hmm. But in the book, Frodo does have some attachment issues that are made pretty clear. He absolutely cannot throw it into the fire already in Bag End.
Mm-hmm.
And if Frodo can't throw the ring into the fire in Bag End, mm-hmm. he's absolutely not going to be able to throw the ring into the fires of Mount Doom.
Yeah.
So you already have attachment issues showing up in Bag End there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good foreshadowing, really.
Mm-hmm.
The throwing the ring in the fire. I never even put those two scenes together in my head till just now.
It was pointed out to me as well.
Gandalf being terrified at offering the ring was done. I like this in the Peter Jackson films, and I liked it in this. It was done very well in this adaptation. I felt like mm-hmm. different, but just as good, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I felt like Sam was excited to leave, which I feel like wasn't in line with his character from the Peter Jackson films.
And yet, Sam being excited to leave is something that's in the books.
Amazing.
Do you get a sense of a pattern here?
Yeah. These last 5 notes almost.
In the books, Elves Sir is an entire theme. Sam desperately wants to go on an adventure to see Elves Sir. Like, he says Elves Sir like 11 times on one page. Mm-hmm. It is not an accident that he is so excited to see Elves Sir. Overall, I don't especially like this depiction of Sam.
Yeah, I had some problems with their depiction of Sam for sure.
What were some of your problems?
Right off the bat, the first thing I noticed was his speech pattern was that he wasn't using proper grammar. They made him ugly, which is, fine, but like it just, that they meant something by that when the animation team decided to design his character in that way, I felt like. And I don't think it was like, like they very much hammered on simple-minded and small, much more than any of the Peter Jackson film did. Even though that was Sam and Frodo's relationship, like they really hammered in, like made him seem like a parody type character of a medieval serf, in my opinion, is what it felt like most of the time.
Yeah, that's a good assessment of it. I can see where they get some of these themes from Book Sam. Book Sam is very parochial, and he does use speech patterns of the working class. Mm-hmm. So I can see where they get some of this. I wouldn't say that he's described as ugly in the book or anything mm-hmm. like that. So like you say, the fact that the animation team made some of these choices, it does tell us something. But they're also working with some undeniable Sam features from the book as well, like the working class speech and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think the big difference between Book Sam and this adaptation's depiction of Sam, even though they have some of these things in common, is what you said about simple-minded. Mm-hmm. Sam might use simple words, and he might use them in the voice of a working-class hobbit, but they're not simple thoughts.
Yes, yeah.
He might approach a complicated problem with a simple solution because he is a simple person. But being a simple person is different than being simple-minded.
Exactly, yeah. Like, there is a type of, and I didn't read the books, but the character Sam I envision from the different depictions of him I've seen, like, he has complex thoughts, he just brings them down to earth, is what it's supposed to feel like. And this doesn't feel like there's anything going on behind those blank eyes with this Sam.
Yes, and that's why I don't like this Sam.
And it cuts to next, where Gandalf separates and goes and meets Saruman. It follows very closely the Peter Jackson films, because I imagine this is how the book depicted everything too. It's
all in description. Mm-hmm. At the Council of Elrond, Gandalf talks about what happened when he went to Isengard.
Oh.
It's not something we actually see firsthand. It's all Gandalf's account.
So this might be good, not to snipe your point, but this might be, like, the pacing of this movie, scene for scene, really was close to the New Line Cinema movies.
Like I said, there's a lot of overlap between them. And
like, showing Saruman at this time happened at this point in Fellowship of the Ring as well.
Exactly. I can try to make a more complete list of the parallels between the New Line Cinema movies and this one in an appendix as well.
Got it.
So one of the things that first stood out to me about Saruman was that Saruman the White was wearing red robes.
Yeah. Yeah. That was pretty funny to me too. He did say eventually, after he, like, tossed aside the title of Saruman the White, he said Saruman of Many Colors. Mm-hmm.
Which is also a book thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought that was interesting, so...
This is another detail that's preserved from the books, which this is a great time for me to foreshadow one of the things we wanted to trace about the colors of wizards. Remember, we wanted to talk about the colors of wizards as being job descriptions. Mm-hmm. So if the white means the job of learning how to defeat Sauron, spearheading that project, throwing that title off, resigning his position, basically, and saying he's Saruman who does all the jobs.
Yeah. He wants to get rid of everybody else.
He wants to do all the jobs and meddle in everyone's jobs, at the same time as Book Saruman also accuses Gandalf of meddling in everyone's jobs.
Yeah.
Ultimate hypocrite. Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, and being a hypocrite is definitely... I feel like quite often a sign in Tolkien, like, that you're a bad guy.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like he very much didn't like that sort of thing.
No, hypocrisy is it's not good. Tempting Gandalf is also not good.
Yeah, I think Saruman tempting Gandalf to give him the location of the ring, or else it'll get to Sauron, is pretty clever as far as, like, evil ploys go.
Yeah, you don't want to have this guy rule over you. You should have me rule over you instead, because I'm the less bad one.
Yeah, and I don't... Didn't he say something about he was working with Sauron a bit, like, just a minute ago or a minute after, one or the other? Or he doesn't confess to that yet?
I think in this one, as I recall, I think this version of how things go down preserves the subtlety of Saruman a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember, at the end of watching the New Line Cinema trilogy, I said that Saruman was my least favorite character because I felt that the movies had lost a lot of the subtlety to his evil. Mm-hmm. And I think this version preserves that a little bit more, because this movie just preserves some surprising details from the book, the subtlety of Saruman's evil being one of them, which is the ambiguity surrounding just how much is Saruman working for Sauron.
He's not completely aligned with Sauron at all times, it seems.
He is aligning himself with Sauron only insofar as to betray Sauron. Mm-hmm. Saruman is not working with Sauron because he agrees with Sauron or because he wants to see Sauron win. He's aligning himself with Sauron long enough to betray him.
Yeah, that's not given at all in the Peter Jackson films. It feels more like join him so he'll eat us last kind of mentality, you know, like the people he's working for will not literally eat, obviously, but like will be the last ones to fall to his evil.
And that's exactly what it is in the movie. Mm-hmm. But I feel like this movie preserves a little bit more of the sense that Saruman is playing his own game and wants to beat Sauron.
Yeah, he has pride, so he thinks he can take him down from treachery.
Saruman was sent to take Sauron down, and Saruman is going to take Sauron down, no matter what the means he needs to use to get to that end, even if those means are industrialization. This Saruman does not seem to have any real connection to industrialization in this story.
No. I wonder why that is. It seems like with everything they preserved, and you said that was a book theme, I don't get why they would have cut that. Maybe they just didn't feel it fit the vibe right. They were trying to go for a more classical vibe. But he definitely felt like a more regular evil wizard, not a a robber baron evil wizard.
Yeah, when he attacks people, he does it with magic, not with industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any ideas on why they might have cut the industrialization, or not really?
I don't really have a whole lot on that one.
Mm-hmm. But there
are certainly references in the book I can think of to Saruman's industrialization. Like Treebeard says that he has a mind of metal and wheels, things like that.
Right.
So I can think of specific book references that would lead to industrialization as a theme. Maybe they didn't want to animate it.
Possibly.
But yeah, no industrialization in this story.
Yeah, no, not much at all. Not a theme.
Then we show up at the sign of the Prancing Pony.
Right, and this is where I noticed the mocapping, the crowd and the Prancing Pony. Or
yeah.
I call it mocapping, but that's 3D animation. It's rotoscoping for 2D animation.
Yeah, it's very prominent here in the Prancing Pony, the rotoscoping.
Yeah, I thought so. This is where I was like, okay, that's looks odd. Speaking of animation, though, Aragorn, he's traditionally animated, and I think based off the lore I got from who and what Aragorn is, he looks older, and I like it. I definitely think it befits the Aragorn that I was described to by you.
Yeah, he's a mature man.
Yeah, definitely. He reacts quite strongly to Frodo joking about becoming a wraith from skipping lunch, which is understandable, but I liked that.
That's a book detail.
Oh, really?
Yes. This is a surprising thing preserved from the book.
Wow. That's funny. I really like Legolas's depiction, too. I hate to say, I think that Legolas is done better in this than even the Peter Jackson films with Orlando Bloom.
I like how happy Legolas is.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. He's definitely... He seems he has a bit more soul to him. I don't know.
Yeah. Peter Jackson's elves are great elves, don't get me wrong. I really like his depiction of elves, but the stoic Vulcan elves is definitely a Peter Jackson thing.
Yeah.
Not a Tolkien thing.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the other elves are depicted quite... We didn't even mention it. The elves' depiction in The Hobbit was way different than Peter Jackson's.
Oh, yeah. Actual wood elves.
Yeah. It was funny, but I didn't mention it because it was weird too. I kind of liked it. It tickled me a bit, but also like, I don't know about this. So yeah, I'm a fan of Aragorn and even more so Legolas's depiction.
And I'm a fan of how they depict evil.
Yes.
In this movie.
Yeah, the depiction of the Ringwraith is much scarier than anything in the Peter Jackson films.
It's spooky. It's genuinely spooky.
Yeah, I liked it, but it definitely had me like unnerved for sure. It was hard to watch. I couldn't imagine watching it as a kid, let alone like I had a hard time watching it as an adult. Yeah.
The scene with the Ringwraith when the hobbits are under the tree root is one of the specific things that's recreated in the New Line Cinema movies.
That's when I said that it had a green, weird, abstract look? Are those connected? Or no? That's further on.
The Ringwraiths in general just have that the green look when they're rotoscoped.
Yeah.
They're a little more just men in cloaks.
I thought the rotoscoping, if they just had the Ringwraiths rotoscope, that would have been really good too.
Yeah.
It made them look like weird and compared, like they didn't need to make the people in the Prancing Pony look oddly realistic, but Ringwraiths looking otherworldly by making them like look like our world, that's so cool.
Yeah, you're right. That would be awesome. I love this idea. If they'd have been rotoscoped the whole time, that would have been great.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the rotoscoped Ringwraiths have this green, weird, abstract look that we both really like.
Yeah.
And one of the things that this movie preserves from the book is the idea that the Ringwraiths will take Frodo to Mordor. The dialogue that they have with Frodo at the river is very close to the book, something along the lines of, come with us, we'll take you to Mordor. Whereas in the New Line Cinema movies, the Ringwraiths are going to kill Frodo. They're going to kill Frodo and take the ring back themselves. In the book, it's Frodo's doom to go to Mordor. One way or another, he will bring the ring to Mordor, either by his will or Sauron's.
Oh, that's a much more intense situation to be in.
He can go to Mordor of his own free will to try to destroy the ring, or the ring wraiths are going to bring him there themselves.
Yeah. More. It's inevitable for that. That's definitely an interesting. I think it's much more interesting than just trying to kill him. That's for sure.
Yep.
And to take him where you want to go, but also that means your mission's failed. But that's very interesting.
Yeah. So this idea of Frodo's fate to go to Mordor with the ring is one that makes it into this movie that I really like. It's a theme that's very impactful to me. You know, one way or another, Frodo's going to do this. So he might as well do it under his own power. But then they land in Rivendell.
Yes. Yeah. And Rivendell is much darker. Like, not like in theme, but like just very dim. Mm-hmm. Although I did see something just today about how medieval castles were much darker in the day than, like, the nobles hated them because of it, which is kind of interesting.
Well, you'd have to light a lot of candles to light up a room.
Yeah, and you know, castles didn't have windows because that would...
Castles.
They were a siege defense, not a palace for people to live in, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of maybe that's what they were going for, though, a castle kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know.
I said Elrond doesn't look much like an elf to me.
What do you mean by look like an elf?
Okay, so I don't mean like in The Hobbit, but so okay, what I mean by Elrond doesn't look like an elf, compare him to Legolas's character design. Legolas is slender. Elrond looks bulky, and he has not slender facial features. His eyes aren't like upturned. He doesn't have elf ears, which I don't remember if Legolas does or doesn't. But Elrond is totally just a dude in this movie, in my opinion, and not what I picture an elf looking like.
Completely valid to feel that way. I just want to point out that some dudes are bulky and some dudes are slender.
That's true. In humans, that is true. I mean, in this scene also, Gimli looks not much like a dwarf, like size-wise, too. They all look like dudes.
Yeah.
Just guys. It doesn't feel fantastical to me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is a good point that human dudes vary, so why wouldn't elf dudes also vary? But it's just poor visual storytelling in my eyes.
Like I said, it's a valid opinion. Boromir also looks weird.
I like Boromir's weird, though. I don't know. I can't put my finger on why I love it so much, but it's
the horns.
It's like it's so over the top that it circles back around to making sense again. I don't know how else to put it.
It's the historically inaccurate Viking horns.
Yeah. I feel like that somehow would happen in Gondor, even though it didn't, even though it's it wasn't historically accurate because it wasn't useful or anything. But I don't know. I Boromir, if I had to pick, Legolas wins, but just barely. I think Boromir's my number 2 for how he looks. And also at the council, he is very much more so open on using the ring.
And I would say that this is probably more like what we see in the book as well. In the book, Boromir is very gung-ho about trying to use the ring, and he has to be told over and over again that they're not going to do that. Yeah.
I feel like in the movies, the implication is that he wants to, but knows better.
In the New Line Cinema movies,
yes,
the implication is that he wants to, and that the ring will only ever answer to Sauron. No one else can use it. But in the books, the way the ring works is anyone can use it who has the proper strength and stature. You just shouldn't.
Yeah, it'll eventually come back around to being bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they decide to send the ring off to Mordor with Frodo, and they end up in the Mines of Moria.
Yeah, and I don't know, something about the delivery. It felt super convenient that a note explaining everything that happened in the mines is just sitting right there in front of the mines. Which,
this happened in the New Line Cinema movie, too. Gandalf found that book and read from it as well. Finding this testament is also from the original book as well.
Now that you mention it, I do remember that, but for some reason it felt super like, oh wow, convenient, much more so in this movie. I think it was more the delivery of Gandalf reading the lines. I don't know.
Entirely possible, yeah. After Moria, they go to Lorien.
Mm-hmm. Lorien? I thought it was well depicted. I liked it. It looked like how I would picture a little hidden elf kingdom.
Yep. And Galadriel was beautiful.
Galadriel was great. She delivered that line I liked in the... I imagine it's from the book. Any of the lines that are in both, I imagine, are also book lines.
Yeah.
But her line about taking the ring just is top-notch. I love that so much.
Mm-hmm. Then, after Lorien, they break the Fellowship.
Yeah. Boromir seemed more logical, is what I would say. It makes more sense in his arguments than the Peter Jackson film, from what I remember. And
what I saw in both those scenes was that they both use a lot of dialogue from the book. Mm-hmm. Boromir's ring-induced monologue in the book is just absolutely great, I think.
Yeah.
They use some different parts. Like, Bakshi took some different lines, and Peter Jackson took some other lines, but a lot of it is based on the book both ways.
That is so interesting that they can depict... Like, I got... Even though he is making the same argument, the way he's making it seems... sober and rational versus he seemed unhinged from what I remember in Peter Jackson. If they're both using lines from the same speech, I feel like that's got to be really good. He's like, depending on how those are interlaced, he seems like he's sober, rational, making sense, and also frenzied at the same time, which, I cannot wait to read these books.
In the book, it's a long speech.
Yeah.
So he goes from rational and calm to frenzied and insane over the course of his speech.
That's so juicy. My mouth is watering just thinking about it. Oh my God.
So, one of the things I noticed in Boromir's death scene in this telling is that Boromir only used his horn after it was too late.
Yeah.
Like, he was already being overrun and shot with arrows before he starts using his horn.
Yeah. Yeah, that wasn't tactically sound for sure. Definitely didn't...
A feature of his horn from the books is supposed to be that it will always bring help.
Yeah.
And in the books, he blows his horn and only more orcs arrive. And Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli aren't able to make it in time. So, in some sense, the efficacy of the horn is... betrayed in the book itself. Like you might still be able to argue that help came, but just not soon enough, or something like that. But
yeah.
But in some sense, the horn fails in the book, even if it's only by latency of time.
Right.
Whereas,
help needs to come in time to be helpful.
Yeah. And in this version, everyone shows up like right away. Mm-hmm. But it was Boromir who just didn't blow the horn.
Yeah, I like that better, actually. That's funny. It's just, Boromir didn't think that one through. Gimli, This is really my one note about him, but Gimli belly aching about running to Isengard, I love that. It at least gave him a moment in this movie, because I feel like he was pretty absent.
Yeah. He doesn't have a large feature in this movie, I don't feel like. Mines of Moria is probably the biggest thing for him.
Yeah.
I noticed that the orcs running went on a long time.
I feel like this is where the animation started to feel the budget.
Yeah.
Really started to feel it.
He didn't need to spend that much on the running. It was a little bit like the barrel scene.
Well, that's why I felt like, because when... movie animation typically will run on a budget at the end of the movie, or season if it's a series. So as it goes, there was more and more rotoscoping as this went on. So I figured that it had to be cheaper. I feel like maybe like large crowds or using stock film rotoscoping might be really cheap, and that's what they ended up doing, was having large crowds of people that they could use for like royalty free, and just drew over that when they ran out of money. I don't know for sure.
Maybe, like I said, I don't know at all. That seems like a plausible theory to me.
But yeah, I feel like once they started running out of money, they just had long scenes of rotoscoped crowds. Is what, and it really, I mean, it gets way worse as we'll discuss. But this is where I noticed it for the first time. It's like, okay, like yeah, it's like you said, this is going on for quite a long time.
Yeah, it was far too long.
Mm-hmm. Gandalf describing his battle with the Balrog was so much like it was fire and brimstone. You know, it was delivered with ferocity and almost terror, and also the afterlife. In the Peter Jackson films, it was like ethereal and so calm, and I like both a lot.
Yeah,
I like the two different ways to describe pretty much the same speech. You know,
I like them both as well.
I'm also going to throw in here, I really liked Merry and Pippin's depiction in this movie, because I didn't put a note anywhere about it. I thought they did a great job with them. Yeah,
Merry and Pippin were great. I thought they were really fun.
Yeah.
So then Frodo and Sam are on their way to Mordor. Pre-New Line Cinema depictions of Gollum are just always very interesting to me, because Andy Serkis's performance is so ubiquitous that any depiction of Gollum now almost seems necessarily that it must take some inspiration or anti-inspiration from it.
Yeah, I felt like this depiction of Gollum was very close to New Line Cinema. Like, it was the inspiration, I feel like.
Yeah, that was where I was going to go with this, was that this felt a lot like a pre-Andy Serkis. And this was one of the things I was going to point out as being a direct inspiration to the New Line Cinema movies.
It's definitely easily, like, it looks just like a 2D rendition of, you know,
Andy Serkis's Gollum.
Andy Serkis's Gollum. Exactly. Yeah. I don't know. Like, Gollum was my favorite character watching the Peter Jackson films. In these movies, he was fun and interesting, but I think it was his weakest in this film. Not that his depiction wasn't interesting. It's just they did not depict the morality struggle he was going through very strongly, I felt like.
Yeah, it was already going downhill from here.
Yeah, it was pretty quick, too.
But yet there's still examples of details preserved from the books, even still. One of them that stood out to me was that Frodo threatens Gollum to never mention getting the precious back, like he does in the book. And one of the differences here that also stood out to me at the same time was that Book Frodo explicitly threatens Gollum with being commanded to jump into the cracks of doom. And this Frodo mentions separately jumping off a cliff and jumping into a fire. It just seems a bizarre detail to include that Frodo threatens Gollum this way, and yet so fundamentally change it from its prophetic foreshadowing nature.
Yeah, maybe they felt it was just a bit too heavy-handed, and
it is exactly that heavy-handed in the book.
Yeah. Maybe the directors thought that was too heavy-handed and just tried to step it back, but just a little. Don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is odd.
Then we ride to Rohan.
Yeah. It took me aback when he said that Éowyn is when Theoden said Éowyn is his sister-daughter.
So
took me a minute to remember niece.
Sister-daughter is actually the term used throughout Old English and Norse literature because those languages don't have a word for niece.
Right. That is very interesting. And then also
niece and nephew are French words.
And aren't the Riders of Rohan based off of old
Anglo-Saxon
culture? So that is quite interesting. Again, and that's just another detail I feel like maybe they just ripped that directly from the book, that phrasing. But it shows that they really pay attention to what themes Tolkien had, for me, that they chose to even include that still.
It's one of those tiny details that get preserved.
I really feel bad for the directors. Maybe they should have had a bigger budget, because they definitely, I could feel the love for Tolkien still in this movie, even though I had more complaints about this one.
I think I feel more love in this one than in the other two. In
The Hobbit, yeah, I agree. I think I see where you're coming from on that. The third one too, yeah.
Especially the third one, but
okay, we'll get. I didn't read your takes on that at all, so I'm excited.
It's my least favorite, but
yeah.
But anyway, we both made an observation regarding the whole Helm's Deep versus Edoras scandal.
Yeah, there's no time. There's so little time discussing what to do next.
It's almost like it's obvious.
It's so obvious. It's like, let's go. Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Yep. Everyone is in agreement. Let's go to Helm's Deep. Yeah. This isn't an issue.
Yeah. As quickly as possible.
It makes sense to go to our most fortified structure to have our battle.
Yeah. And I'm sadly, in my opinion, this is where the movie really, really fell apart. I feel like,
Yeah.
it was hard to see because Helm's Deep was done so well in Peter Jackson. It seems like such an important point in the books. It's like a, turning point, and they still managed to do that with storytelling, but the animation fell apart. The tension I felt like was shameful compared to the Peter Jackson film, how little build up there was.
Yeah.
And then it's just like a never ending orc fight for, I didn't time it, but way too long.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. By the time it was getting to Helm's Deep, things were getting hard to watch.
Yeah. There was one small scene interspliced with Sam and Frodo and Gollum climbing up a mountain. Mm-hmm. And then it does show their victory, and it says, like, and the ending dialogue from the narrator, too, didn't quite make sense with the terms of the story, because it doesn't resolve Frodo's story, the main part, I feel. And it just says, they defeated the orcs, and everything was good. Like...
Yeah.
What?
It's when you try to end a story in 5 sentences.
Yeah. They needed. It's like they need a whole nother movie.
Which was one of the things that I was reading about, that there was supposed to be part 1 and part 2, and then because of problems, fill in the blank on which version you're reading, but because of problems, they never got back to do part 2.
I wonder. I feel like they might have cut it a bit sooner. If they did have a part 2, they wouldn't have gone all the way to Helm's Deep. Mm-hmm. Possibly. They probably just stopped exactly halfway between putting them together.
But since we're lacking a Return of the King in this version of the storytelling, we watched the Rankin and Bass Return of the King next.
And again, the prologue, I approve. Yeah,
I thought it was a pretty good prologue as well.
I thought it was, of these 3, the strongest. I don't know. Like just talking about the beginning narration, it cuts into a framing device pretty soon here, but like the beginning narration going over stuff I liked it. Mm-hmm. Pippin had a major downgrade, and
yeah,
it does come up later, but yeah, he was way better in the last movie.
Mm-hmm, for sure. I think I like the Bakshi prologue the best.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I haven't really watched them side by side, and I did, full disclosure, watch these quite apart from each other even, so it's hard to pick a favorite. I like a good prologue, though. So
yeah.
Sets the scene. It's great.
The point is, it has a prologue. That's what it needs as a Lord of the Rings adaptation.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what we have learned. You can't do a visual Lord of the Rings adaptation without a prologue.
Yeah. What is that referencing? What didn't have a prologue?
They've all had prologues.
Oh, they all have. Okay, good. I was about to say, like, is there one that tried and then it doomed it?
Nope. It's just that they've all had prologues.
Yeah.
So we know that everything needs a prologue.
And so the framing device, it shows Frodo coming home from destroying the ring at the beginning, right?
Yeah, he's in Gondor, I think, at this point. Or, no, he's in Rivendell.
Is he in Rivendell? And
yeah, Frodo's in Rivendell at this point.
And he's explaining to Bilbo what's going on. I did like one line he says is, because Bilbo seemed confused why they destroyed the ring for a minute, and he seemed to be very desperate and miss it, which I thought that was kind of good, actually. I like that.
Yeah.
And then he told him you innocently used it for good without knowing, is an interesting take on Bilbo's lack of corruption from the ring, I feel.
Yeah.
Because Bilbo mentions he used it to help defeat Sauron, and so Frodo's answer said, yes, you innocently used it for good without knowing what it was.
To defeat Smaug.
Yes. Yeah, Smaug, excuse me.
And yeah, not knowing what it was that he had did help protect him from its corrupting powers for a while. Hmm. It's not like he could be tempted to take over the world with his powerful ring when he just thinks it grants invisibility.
Yeah.
It's not that protects him from all its corrupting influences either, but it's a measure of protection.
It would eventually get there, but it would probably take much longer.
Yeah.
So I do think the frame device to condense the other movies is hard to follow. Like, I get they had a lot of picking up to do and combining the other 2 movies. Like, they had a lot of plates to spin making this film, I feel like.
Yeah.
But I did have trouble, if I didn't see the other two, and this was the only one I watched, if I didn't know the story, like, it was very hard to figure out what had already happened. Like, did not do a good job, even though it was attempting to.
Yeah. It's a lot to cover when you're picking up at the end of Lord of the Rings, trying to tell Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I did like the Minstrel of Gondor framing, having him sing about Frodo and the Nine Fingers and all that. I thought that was really cool. Mm-hmm. But I also found it very hard to watch the hobbits interact.
Yeah.
Frodo doesn't feel right somehow. He doesn't feel traumatized enough to me.
Oh, okay.
Like, he talks way too casually about what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the Frodo from the books he might talk about some of it, but it would have to be for an event, and he wouldn't be happy about it.
I see what you mean there. When I saw that note at first, I was like, Frodo seems to me like not like the defining characteristic I got from him watching the scene. He was so blunt and matter of fact about it, but he was also like, other than that, he wasn't talking much. He wasn't jovial. He wasn't happy. He was very flat in effect. I felt like that was pretty good, but yeah, it is pretty weird that the only thing he was talking about was this, and he was flatly talking about it instead of stirring anything. I get that too, being odd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he just didn't feel right to me, and I thought that Bilbo should already have understood more about what the ring meant and its powers. Like, he was at the Council of Elrond.
Bilbo felt a little bit memory care, honestly. Like, he felt like cognitively in decline, and I thought that's the vibe they were going for. Like, too old to understand what's going on in around him in full.
Yeah, but I just didn't like that.
And like, it didn't feel like, Bilbo should know. Like, it didn't seem like Bilbo was genuinely confused, and that's also kind of like Frodo matter-of-factly saying, it really felt like Frodo felt like Bilbo should know this too, the way he was saying it, and it was very odd to pick that, I feel like.
Yeah.
For me, what I thought was happening there was, with the ring being destroyed and Bilbo's life being extended, it was showing the effects of age on him.
Yes.
Which is kind of why I was okay with it, but it did feel off. I get where you're coming from, too.
After the ring is destroyed, age does catch up with Bilbo in the book. Mm-hmm. But it just seemed he's not going to have that much Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Like 2 months after the ring is destroyed.
Yeah, it was odd. Definitely odd. And then it cuts, and I was a little confused from the framing, and then it cuts into Sam. It doesn't show exactly explicitly what goes down with Sam, Frodo, and Gollum to get them all separated. I don't remember in the Peter Jackson film Sam wearing the ring.
I don't believe Sam puts it on in the movie, but Sam does wear the ring in the book.
He does in the book. So that the Sam is much better than the Sam in the last film, though.
Yes.
Very much a glow up for him. I do like that when the ring was trying to corrupt Sam, it showed him driving out orcs to make the world a garden, because he's a gardener.
That is his book temptation, yes.
Yeah, that is fun. That is very good characterization. This feels much more like the Sam that I understand, although it's not the same as the Peter Jackson films with Sean Astin. It's a different take on it, but I still feel like this is much more in line with Sam than the last film.
I agree. I like this Sam a lot better than the Bakshi Sam. This is like the one thing that I like better about this adaptation than I do about the Bakshi adaptation.
Yeah.
Is that Sam is so much better. One of the things this adaptation has going for it, though, is that this is Sam's high point. Like, this part of the story is where Sam is Chad. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the thing about it, too, with, like, Sam, like, the title he gets is Samwise the Brave. He gives it to himself, or is given. I don't know which.
I believe Frodo gives it to him.
But, like, before they leave, Sam is meek seeming. So and he probably never thought himself brave. I really like that about his character development.
Yes,
and he probably still,
humble.
If Frodo never called him brave, never would have called himself Samwise the Brave. He didn't think of himself as brave. He thought of himself as doing what was needed to be done, Because
that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
And we never get to see Bakshi develop his Sam into who Sam the Chad could be.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder how they would have, especially with the Sam they had depicted, I just couldn't see him doing all of this,
I agree with your skepticism personally, but I think the absence of evidence here creates a sort of a vacuum that still makes it hard to judge. We're
That's
judging
true.
we're judging Sam at his worst in one adaptation versus Sam at his best in another adaptation, and I don't think that this comparison is necessarily fair to the Sam we like less.
Fair. That's understandable. And the best Sam is still Sean Astin. Anyway,
Yes.
so it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It's like racing for second place.
pretty much. But I like this Sam. This is a good second place.
Yeah.
One of the odd things I noticed was that Sting seems to just glow all the time in this version, I guess.
He glows more when the orcs are around, but yeah.
Yeah, just kind of always glowing.
Always a little bit glowing for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. This version got rid of a few things.
Yeah.
Let's play Where Did It Go?
What they got rid of Faramir completely?
You mentioned that he has like one shot at the end, but yes, they got rid of Faramir completely from the story.
Yeah, Denethor's madness makes so much less sense without the death of his son. Like, just because he thinks he's going to lose a battle. I get, like, the justification, like, you don't want to be a slave, but, like, you could go down fighting and not become a slave, too. I don't know.
Yeah.
No mention of Boromir also in his madness, Denethor's madness, that he was seemingly forgotten about.
I mean, people who play video games online just want to randomly give up too.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, he rage quits. Rage quitting, for sure.
Surrender.
Where was Gimli also? I noticed that, like, after watching the whole movie, as the credits were rolling, I was like, was Gimli even seen at all?
I couldn't think of seeing Gimli in this at all.
And I get in The Return of the King, Peter Jackson, he's still... They fit a few lines in for him, but he's not he doesn't play any major roles, really, either.
Yeah.
But he's still there, at least.
Yeah, he's there cracking some one-liners.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a few plots going on. We have the Rohirrim that bring us to the Battle of the Pelennor.
Yeah. Yeah, it starts with Gandalf running down because the Witch King arrived. They use Grond to break the gate. I like the Witch King in this one a lot.
Grond.
They got Grond.
Grond.
Grond is weird, too. It was like drooling. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Witch King, I liked his depiction here. He was freaky looking.
Yeah, pretty scary.
The movie, I feel like, did a good job visually depicting, I used a keyword here, the eucatastrophe of the Rohan riders, the Rohirrim arriving. I felt like the sun coming down in the way that they depicted that with the riders coming, was well done.
Yeah.
Eventually the tides turn. What panics the horses? I don't even remember what did it. But something panics all of the horses.
The Mumakil?
What is it?
The Oliphants?
The Oliphants, of course. Yes. And panicked horses are the scariest horses. Most terrifying of the horse.
Yep.
They do in this movie a lot directly. They very much directly state it, like the narrator says it. But as Frodo and Sam are journeying through Mordor, their journey is reflected the Battle of Pelennor Fields a lot.
Specifically, what did you notice for this?
I think just before the Rohirrim arrive, Frodo says, "We need some good. If there's any good in this world, please appear." And then it cuts and says, and then it shows the Rohirrim show up at Pelennor, showing there's good in the world. And then also in the Mouth of Mount Doom, when Frodo falls prey to the Ring's allure, it shows the battle sway the other way at Pelennor Fields directly. Like, and it cuts one for one, and the narrator even like directly addresses this a bit. I forget exactly what the lines are, but
yeah,
he says something to the effect of like, and so this darkness affects here and there. I thought that was fun. I liked that.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, that is really cool.
I liked Éowyn. I mean, there could have been more of her, but I liked, you know, her voice. The voice actress they picked for her was really, I felt like, had strong conviction in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did well. Well, let's move to Mordor. We got the Mordor plot.
Yeah, and like I said, they were interspliced, but cutting back, the orc that Sam is fighting ends up running off a bridge, which is an example of evil undoing itself.
I really like to see this note. It was it was something I had missed, and so you always gotta love to see evil undoing itself.
Yeah. Yeah, it is fun. Sam and Frodo have a grim discussion about starving to death and dying of dehydration to finish the mission. Like, they have no water, no food.
That's pretty book accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, it was... that one felt also pretty World War I-esque. I really liked this rendition. I don't know if this was a book song, but where there's a whip, there's a way.
Not a book song.
No.
Where there's a whip,
It
there's
goes
a way.
so hard. I would like listen to that just driving. Like, I love it. Oh my god.
This is the highlight of the movie. I love it.
That was the best part for you. Oh no.
It's just so funny. We don't want to go to war today.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved it. Amazing.
One of the things I wanted to point out was that Frodo and Sam have the Eye of Sauron on their armor.
Oh yeah.
Remember how we talked about Sauron is not a literal flaming eye in a tower, but
Right.
the Eye of Sauron is this emblem, this insignia.
Mm-hmm.
And here we can see that emblem being used on the armor.
Yeah. But it's facing out, like they're behind it. Make you think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Frodo says to Gollum at some point, if you touch me again, you should be cast in the fire of doom.
Yep.
Which we talked a bit about, but yeah.
And then Gollum touches him again. But yeah, this also happens in the book. It's twice that Gollum being thrown into the fire in the book is foretold.
Yeah. You think he would have been more careful.
He wants the ring.
Yeah.
Then we have our Minas Tirith plot.
Mm.
Gandalf calls Pippin a valuable assistant at one point, and I think that this is the nicest thing any Gandalf has ever said to Pippin.
Yeah, definitely not a fool, but an honest fool. Is that Pippin or is that Merry?
That's Gandalf about Pippin.
That is Pippin, yeah. Yeah. No.
A fool, but an honest fool he remains.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed was that the Palantir in this adaptation was given future-telling abilities.
In this one, they do?
In this adaptation, Denethor references how the Palantir has shown him the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In the books, the Palantir are more like video calling devices than divination devices. But this is also a choice that Rings of Power has made as well, to make the Palantir more like future-telling devices.
Right. I do think Denethor uses, things that are currently happening, like the ships on their way, to say like it's I've come to the conclusion that we're doomed. Like, it has shown me that by showing me all these different forces. I don't think it's like directly divination in this one. Where Rings of Power, it's more future telling than this even.
It's undeniably future telling in Rings of Power.
But in the books, they're just like you said, video, like you could just see the world through them.
Yeah. It's like video calling. So in the books, Denethor video calls with Sauron, and Sauron shows him, like you say, the ships sailing up, and he shows him his forces amassed in Mordor. Mm-hmm. But Denethor does not actually see the future.
Yeah. Yeah, that is... Denethor, I like that better.
Denethor doesn't see Aragorn in the ships. He just sees the ships.
Yeah. I think that's a very good, like, a moral, like, not to give out hope just because things look grim,
Despair is for those who see the end beyond all doubt. Mm-hmm. But you can't see the end beyond all doubt. Not even the very wise can see all ends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very, I think, one of the best and strongest themes throughout Lord of the Rings is to, how powerful holding out hope is.
Definitely.
And it comes up a lot. In the end, the song Faramir is there. They referenced him, but he doesn't talk. He's standing there waving.
So he was cut from the movie. Denethor would approve of the amount of Faramir we get in this movie.
Yeah, Denethor would have liked that, probably. It is kind of Denethor, like something Denethor would do, like to be so distraught that his son is dead, right? But then also not say anything about Faramir still.
Yeah.
that's in line with him.
Which brings us to some concluding thoughts.
Yeah. Okay, so first thing I want to say, this movie reminds me of another Rankin and Bass favorite, The Last Unicorn. They were produced pretty closely together. Like, I didn't get that vibe from The Hobbit at all, but this movie just, I don't know, the pacing, the style, the form, the effects, the way that they depict magic, the singing every like 4 minutes.
So I've never seen The Last Unicorn. You said that this is a Rankin and Bass production as well?
Yes. Yeah, it came out after this. I think it's better. Maybe a good bonus episode or something.
Yeah. I think that sounds like a great idea to do The Last Unicorn at some point.
And I don't know if this was a Rankin Bass thing or a Tolkien thing or whatever. As I was watching the ending, the churchy sounding song and singing about the return of the king made me realize Aragorn is, in this scene specifically, he reminded me of Jesus Christ, like, a lot. And I don't know if Tolkien would have done that on purpose, really. I don't know if that's in the books, but in this movie, I got that.
Well, we can see what you think of it when we get to the books.
That's true. Also, I did think this when Frodo was limping along carrying the pole, well, he was carrying the ring, but using the pole to support himself, reminded me very much of, like, the Passion of Christ movie where Jesus is walking with the cross. So I feel like Rankin Bass really, I don't know if they did that on purpose. I feel like Rankin Bass at least did it on purpose, but there was some parallels to Christianity here I picked up on.
I did not pick up on it at all, but then again, I am not the person you want to talk to about picking up on Christianity and things. I didn't pick up on any Christian influence on Narnia until it was insisted upon by many sources.
Yeah, it's much more, I feel like, apparent and direct in Narnia.
Yeah, and so if I can miss it there, I'm going to miss it in Rankin Bass.
Yeah, that's fair.
But the fact that you saw it means that it was there when you watched it. Yeah, and I now this theme is going to be also in my head along with the World War I. I don't like it as much, but I feel like I'm going to be picking up on this as I go through Tolkien's works now. I mean, Tolkien describes his works as fundamentally Catholic when he talks to a Catholic bookstore owner. Yeah. What precisely he means by fundamentally Catholic, I think, has some interesting boundaries around it. Is it fundamentally Catholic because it is a world built on a singular creator deity and therefore compatible in some sense with Christian philosophy, morality, because it has this fundamental characteristic? Is it fundamentally Catholic because Sam exhibits virtues like humility, which are very Christian virtues? Or is it fundamentally Catholic because Lembas represents the Eucharist? Or is it fundamentally Catholic because you draw symbolism with Christ and Aragorn? Some of these I would say yes, and some of these I would say no. But you could argue that any of these would be a way to interpret what fundamentally Catholic means. So without reading more on that quote, I would imagine that is him saying that the morals are fundamentally Catholic and what he views as fundamentally Catholic. Like, he probably, as a Catholic, views his morality very in line with the morals of the Bible. And so he feels like that they are hand in hand. And I can see an argument for that too. But I don't know. I'd have to read more on that. His morality is very in line with medieval Catholic theologians. Yes. Don't know if I'm going to like this, but it's one of those things I feel like I can't unsee, and now I'm going to be just noticing these, especially like knowing Tolkien, probably medieval Catholic themes throughout the film. Well, let's watch for them. We still have Rings of Power. And most importantly... but most importantly, we have the actual books. Yeah, I will put attack in this. This is going to be a theme of mine. Let's follow it. I'm going to say off the bat that each movie had its strengths and weaknesses, but my least favorite was by far Lord of the Rings. Funnily enough, I'm going to say that Lord of the Rings was my most favorite. I think my least favorite was Return of the King, just because some of it was very difficult to watch. I think it was the most difficult to watch of all of them. I enjoyed the Hobbit movie for being a fun kids movie. I enjoyed the Lord of the Rings for what it was until it fell off. Yeah. But Return of the King felt somewhere in between there, and it didn't fit well into either one for me.
Yeah, I could see that. I feel like my problem. So The Hobbit was clear and concise. I will say that, and good for That's good for kids, but also just good for viewers in general. You like to understand why a scene is happening, and I feel like in both the other movies, there was times where it cut and I didn't understand why. Even though I know the overall arching story, it's like if I were watching this for the first time, I'd have no idea what's going on, and I don't, really understand the connection why they would cut there to this scene or. What exactly is going on, where in the story this is happening, what's about to happen. It was just a lot of confusion watching them. I felt it a lot stronger, though, in the second film. Mm-hmm. I felt like that happening quite often. The third film in the beginning really also had that, but I feel like, again, had a lot of spinning plates, I said, to balance. I feel like the third movie got better as it went on, I will say.
Yeah.
Sam's journey in the beginning is strong, but like the prologue before that kind of was confused, and then it kind of cut back to that feeling again of confusion, and then it slowly improved from there. But it's weird. It's a back and forth where the Lord of the Rings film kind of was a consistent feeling. So I get why maybe that was, but I don't know. I had the hardest time watching the second film. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. There was a lot to cover, and I feel like I still haven't hit on everything that I thought while watching these. There was a lot going on here. I would say overall watch them at least once, unless you hate animation or don't like watching children's media at all. But I don't know. I always find like if a children's media is good, it's still good media.
C.S. Lewis would agree with you. Mm. And yeah, I mean, they're worth a watch anyway. Make your own opinion.
Yeah. So that was our rings for today.
Now let's do our things. Let's talk about some quotes from these movies. First, how did you feel about the dialogue from the Hobbit movie?
I imagine that a lot of the dialogue describing the Lone Mountain, but also just a lot of the narration probably was ripped right from the books.
The poetry is definitely from the book. Mm-hmm. I didn't notice anything else I recognized as being from the book. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that there wasn't something from the book in there, and I just didn't notice it. But as I was rewatching the description of the Lonely Mountain and stuff like that, I didn't have anything strike me as being, oh, I know that's from the book.
I wish I wrote down more. Was like every time I heard the narrator talking, I was like, I think this is probably a book thing.
Yeah. And like I said, I just didn't see anything, so I guess I got to say that I didn't think anything there was from the book, other than the poetry. The poetry was definitely
there. A lot of the songs, except for Whip, I feel like some of the songs had to be from the book, right?
The Return of the King songs were not from the book.
No. Why do they have songs, but not the book songs?
By the time you get to the Return of the King, the songs are very abstract.
Wouldn't fit a children's movie well?
No. Alliterative verse is generally not seen as something you want to put in a kid's movie.
No. Yeah, I guess not. Where there's a whip, there's a way, you definitely do. I can't get over how much I like that song.
Where there's a whip, there's a way.
Oh, it goes so hard.
Well, in fact, my favorite quote from the Hobbit movie was this. When Bilbo says, "The remainder of the morning was spent in seeking my companions, and I found them, finally, in a place as black and terrible as a patch of midnight that had never been cleared away." I just really liked that quote. It was such a nice description of what the forest looked like. Mm-hmm. The patch of midnight that had never been cleared away is very evocative.
Yeah, I agree.
Given our conversation in the last episode about Thorin's death quote, I thought we should take special care to consider Thorin's death quote here as compared to his quote in the book as well.
Okay.
In this adaptation, Thorin says, "Child of the kindly West, I have come to know, if more of us valued your ways, food and cheer above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world." Versus the book quote, which I didn't give the entire quote last time, but since Child of the Kindly West is mentioned here, I'm going to give the broader context. Thorin says, "There is more in you of good than you know, child of the kindly West. Some courage and some wisdom blended in measure. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world." So the movie quote has been shortened, but that child of the kindly West has been brought in.
Yeah. And, I feel like they just cut one line from the book quote. The some courage and some wisdom blended in measure, because the second line. I mean, not exactly.
They also omitted song from the list of things Bilbo values. Food and cheer above hoarded gold versus food and cheer and song above hoarded gold.
Yeah, that is interesting. I feel like Thorin's death quote was pretty good, pretty well rendered. I feel like I liked it.
Yeah, it felt really good. So that was everything we had on quotes from The Hobbit, but you have a few quotes from Bakshi's Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, there was a few lines that I kind of liked. Frodo. So this one was when Frodo was discussing if Aragorn was a threat or not, and he said, "I feel like." I feel like one of the enemy would look fairer and feel fouler, which I liked a lot. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a backhanded compliment.
It is. This is a quote from the book, and it actually ends up in the New Line Cinema movies as well.
Does it? I don't remember it in the New Line Cinema movies.
They're walking through the marshes, not the dead marshes, the marshes between Bree and Rivendell, where it's like right before they get to the marshes or something like that. They're walking on their way.
I do also like in Rivendell, the Council of the Ring. They say this is not a question of who wants to go, but who will.
This is such a good quote.
That really captures like Frodo's obligation, you know, and the rest of the Fellowship too.
It's a little bit similar to a quote that Gandalf has in the book, where when they're talking about going to the mines of Moria, do they take the path to the mines? Gandalf says it's not a question of who wants to follow me, but who will. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's pretty good. I like it.
It's a good line.
So Boromir, they're arguing back and forth about something or another. I don't quite remember the full context, but it's
about Lorien.
Yeah, Lorien, right. They're arguing about going to Lothlorien, and they say they're talking about if it's a good idea. And during the argument, Boromir says, "That is not what we say in Gondor," and Legolas just drops that you know nothing in Gondor. Like, I don't know, the delivery of this line too is like, wow.
Yeah, harsh.
And then was this about Gandalf?
Yes.
So I picked this because it was fun. That's why I thought all these were Hobbit quotes for a minute here, because he does this so much in The Hobbit. He disappears, and this is a good way to show it, like he's gone again, like then it's answered like wind in the grass.
One of the lines I really liked from The Return of the King was from one of the songs. The line is, "Things I can't do without are the small things that life is all about." Mm-hmm. It was a song all about minimalism, basically.
Yeah.
And, the small things that you can't do without, things like food and shelter and water and things like that, are what your life is all about. It just seemed very Hobbit-y to me. So I liked that line.
Yeah.
Something I didn't like from the Return of the King movie was there were references throughout to things like God help us and the devil himself. And maybe this is getting into like your Christian observation here with it, that I don't like those kind of references precisely because it's jarring to me to hear things about, the Christian devil or things like that, when this is fundamentally a pre-Christian story. Yeah,
it's odd to me that with such attention to detail of dialogue that they won't say Nis, but they will say God and devil is very odd.
Nis was from the Bakshi.
Oh, these were different ones. Okay.
And The Return of the King is Rankin and Bass.
Okay, so that makes sense. During the time, I feel like those were such colloquial terms that they really lost the God and devil meaning. Back in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, they were just turns of phrase. But yeah, it was pretty careless.
Yeah. It just didn't appeal to me. I like to have the language feel natural with what I would expect the characters to actually say, which would not include references to the devil, usually.
Yeah.
Maybe devilry, but that's about it. So, we bring you a Hobbit Habit. What is our Hobbit Habit, JD?
So we need to invite a friend to tea. Optional, do not bother knocking.
It's like how Bilbo told the dwarves to come by for tea and to not bother knocking at the end of The Hobbit.
Right. Okay.
So Do like Bilbo was doing to the dwarves. Invite a friend over for tea. Don't have your friend knock if you want to.
Okay.
That works for you. And then have some tea with your friend.
Okay.
Today, I had a friend over for tea, and she just came right in. She didn't bother knocking, and I made her some tea, and we sat down and had a nice time drinking our tea. It was really fun. I felt really hobbity. She felt really hobbity. I told her we were doing it for the podcast. She was excited and made a great time.
It does sound like a good idea. I would very much like to do that. I will accept this task.
Follow up with us when you've had a friend over for tea.
Yeah, definitely. And so we have a question that needs answering.
Speaking of who to invite over for tea...
If you were a hobbit of Hobbiton and knew all of what Lobelia Sackville Baggins has done to and for the fine folks of Hobbiton, would you offer her some tea? From definitely not those rude bag-end Baggins.
Why, yes. Yes, I would offer her some tea, in fact.
Expound.
Lobelia Sackville Baggins may have some slights on her character from her early years trying to steal Bilbo's spoons and things like that we've seen in the Hobbit movie. And we might see how Bilbo doesn't really like the Sackville Bagginses very much in the beginning of the Fellowship. But what these adaptations don't include is Lobelia Sackville Baggins's character arc.
There's a whole arc for her?
She goes through a lot of stuff by the end of The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, wow.
They rescue her from prison at the end.
Oh, wow.
And Lobelia Sackville Baggins, at the end of the day, she was okay. She sided with the right people at the very end of the day.
I would offer over to you just to hear some jail stories.
She was a fine woman by the end, and upon her death, she donated all of her estate to Frodo to help the hobbits of the Shire who had been hurt with a story that had happened that we'll read about in the book.
Again, so excited for the book. Especially with Boromir's speech that we mentioned earlier. Oh my god, yes. Yep.
Well, there's lots of good stuff in the book, but yes.
I imagine.
I would definitely invite Lobelia Sackville Baggins over for some tea.
Yeah.
Would you?
Based off what I know, yes. Which isn't much because I haven't read the books. I just know what you just said.
Just keep an eye on your silver spoons.
Okay.
You can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram through the links in the description. Please follow, like, and subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and other major podcast platforms. To have your question or comment featured on the podcast, please send an email to shirepost.ringsandthings@gmail.com.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider contributing to our efforts through the Patreon link in the description.
A hearty hobbity thank you to our first supporter, Lori J. from Florida. We are deeply grateful for your support.
And a special thank you to our editor and spiritual producer, Stephen Jeffrey. And thank you for listening.